Well, welcome everybody. My name is Whitney Zeigler. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Rocks Organizing. We are a small business local here to the Portland metro area in Southwest Washington. We're women-owned, we're LGBTQIA owned, and we're an all-women company. And we assist folks with professional organizing, right-sizing, downsizing, as some people know it. We also do provide moving assistance and estate clearouts. And today we're going to be talking about senior right-sizing, and we'll talk about what is right-sizing. I want to introduce our special guest, who is one of our very own team members, Andrea Thompson. Andrea joined us early this year after having recently moved across the country from New York. So she has been on her own right-sizing and moving journey, and we're really lucky that she's going to be sharing her own experience with us. And then we'll open it up just for an open Q&A. We'd love to hear what your questions are. Love to hear if you are on your own right-sizing journey right now. And if you want any advice, want to put a question out, this is a very interactive workshop. So we hope that you'll learn from each other and that everyone will feel comfortable participating. So with that, Andrea, I'm happy to hand it off to you. Could you tell us about your journey and about the lessons that you learned from it?
Yes, I can. Yes, thank you, Whitney. Senior right-sizing and moving. I did both recently. So you can learn from all my mistakes. My first piece of advice is never move across the country during a pandemic when your significant other has a back injury and cannot get off the couch, because it will all fall on you. Our story is my husband, John, and I had been living in New York for about 30 years. We have two 20-something daughters. They were both out west. And John and I were working at home during the pandemic, and we just really missed our kids so much. So we thought, hey, let's move to Portland and be closer to them. So sounded like a good idea. We started to right-size in preparation for the move, or should I say, I started to right-size. And 2 months before we wanted to put our house on the market, I just started going on this cleaning out frenzy. And I got rid of kids' toys, old clothes, books, tools, dead appliances, dead plants, 20 years of John's unopened bank statements. Thanks, honey. It's all that stuff that piles up with decades of living in one place. If you've lived in the same house for a long time, you know what I'm talking about. So I slowly worked my way through the house, the basement, the garage. And another piece of advice I learned the hard way: don't try to clean out your basement and your garage in the same weekend. It is a very bad idea. Another piece of advice I have, especially if you're over 65 like me, and you're moving to a smaller place, get help. Get help from an organizer. I happen to know an amazing organizer. It's really worth every penny. Back then, I actually didn't know there was such a thing as professional organizers. So I did it all myself while my husband sat on the couch. But the most important advice I think I could give is to be ruthless about getting rid of stuff. You really don't need every piece of artwork your kids ever made, every soccer trophy, every family photo. You probably don't wear 70% of the clothing in your closet, and you're not going to reread most of your books, right? Also, those dishes you inherited from your Aunt Alice, it's okay to let them go. It really is. You may feel guilty, but your loved ones would not want you to be burdened with their stuff. So you can say goodbye to things like that. And if you find it's hard to decide on whether to let something go, you just ask yourself, do I really want to pay $6 to $8 a pound to move this thing to my new home? Maybe I don't. And another thing I learned is it's really important to think about how much or how little furniture you can fit into your new home. Too much furniture will make it feel cramped. It can actually be dangerous, as Whitney just talked about. You don't want to be tripping over little end tables wherever you go. And one more point that's probably obvious, but count the closets in your new space. And count your kitchen cabinets and compare to what you have now. It'll help you understand, okay, this is how much less storage space I'm going to have. And think about, are you going to lose a garage? Will you no longer have an attic or a basement? All these things really need to be taken into account. And you may think, that's too much work. I'm just moving locally. I'm going to pack it up and I'll deal with it after I move. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. I know from working with Whitney, it's very stressful for clients who didn't right size before they moved. And then they try to fit the contents of a 3-bedroom house into a 1-bedroom apartment. It's a nightmare. So right size before you move. Anyway, after I right sized all our crap, donated, gave away, forced it on friends, whatever, we had this nice, clean, minimal house. We put it on the market and it sold in one day. And I was like, oh my goodness, now we really have to do something. And the buyers paid cash and they wanted to move in 3 weeks. So I started packing like a madwoman, getting moving company quotes, figuring out how do we ship cars across the country. And also found an Airbnb to rent in Portland till we found a home. And then it kind of hit us, right, we haven't been to Portland in 30 years. What if we don't like Portland? What are we going to do? We were going to take a trip out there to check it out and see if we, still liked it as we did when we went there when we were in our 30s. But the pandemic said, no, you're not getting on a plane. So we just took a leap of faith and we moved. We get out here and we fell in love with Portland. We fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. You people are so much nicer than New Yorkers. We are so happy to be here. Within a few weeks, we found a house that we loved. We did some renovations. We moved our stuff out of storage and I unpacked every single box. And then my husband, John, got back surgery and was suddenly fine. As he says, timing is everything. Ironically, we ended up not downsizing to a smaller house. We found this bigger house that was cheaper than the house we sold. So we're like, hey, let's move into a bigger house. So we have this nice airy space, no clutter. Isn't it nice? And then both our kids moved home during the pandemic. And they took all their stuff into the house and took over. But, we're happy to have them. But I am very, very glad I right-sized so ruthlessly. And now I'm surrounded by family, not stuff. And that's what matters to me. So that's my senior right-sizing and living happily ever after story.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing your story with us. I love and appreciate your sense of humor and having you as part of our team.
You have to have a sense of humor if you move across country.
Yes, absolutely. I am curious, for those of us who are not familiar with the term right sizing, do you feel comfortable explaining what that means and why our team uses that term instead of downsizing?
Sure. It used to be called downsizing but that word has such a negative connotation. It means giving up things. It means losing things. It can mean losing your job. Right sizing to us is the proper term because it's about taking power over your stuff and empowering yourself to decide what matters most to you and taking only that stuff and letting other stuff go. So your possessions don't possess you. So we call it right sizing.
Thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And I'm curious if you're on a right sizing journey for those who are attending, or if you have specific sticky points that you've hit. Pat, and then Alexis after Pat.
Okay. I am definitely looking for tips. My daughter, who is, you can see her picture below, Elaine, is helping me bring stuff down from our attic. Like I was executor for my dad and then for my sister, and stuff tended to just, time ran out and you just brought everything home. And so our attic has lots of stuff. I'm sitting on the porch where Elaine, my daughter, is bringing stuff down from the attic, and then I go through it. And it's not going well. And now it's time that we usually start using the porch, and it is just covered with stuff. So if anybody has any tips to make this move a little faster, because my husband likes to eat dinner out here, and there is no way I should move my camera around and you could see the table and the rest of the porch covered with stuff. Anyway, any thoughts for me?
I'm curious, Pat, you mentioned that it's not going well. Do you feel like you can identify what the roadblocks are, or what's behind that?
Well, yeah, somewhat. I mean, right now I'm going through a bunch of my dad's stuff, and I'm thinking, would this be interesting later? Like one of Elaine's twins is named after my dad, and some other relatives too, I think. But I thought, oh, well, maybe he'd be interested in seeing this. So I'm just having trouble letting go, I think. Um, and organizing. So Elaine is very helpful with that, getting big plastic things that you can see through, because they were in boxes, plus they were in our basement that flooded at our old place. So the boxes were all wet, and a lot of the stuff is all wet, papers. I mean, from what, 10 years ago. So the clear plastic boxes seem like a very good idea, because at least when they're up in the attic, you can get an idea of what's in them, even though there are notes on the boxes, what they are. Anyway, any other thoughts? Appreciated.
I think using the clear bins is very helpful because it does protect your items, and it is helpful to see what's in there. We use them a lot too when we're working with our neurodivergent clients, because it's out of sight, out of mind. So if we can't see it, it literally ceases to exist for us. And then you're right, it is nice. You can see at a glance what's in that bin. Andrea, do you have any tips for Pat? Like, what did you do when you encountered sentimental items and you weren't sure whether or not your daughters wanted them?
Well, mostly I asked my daughters, do you want this? I didn't really have a lot of sentimental stuff. My parents both died fairly young, and we just didn't have a lot of their possessions left behind. I just, it is a difficult thing, but I think you can still honor your loved one without keeping everything that they had. I think sometimes the less you keep, the more significant each of those pieces becomes.
So kind of keep the best of the best.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I really think that loved ones don't want you to be burdened with all their stuff and dragging it around from, one house to another. When it doesn't really serve you, you have the memories, those will never go away, but you don't have to keep all the things too. I think the most important ones you keep and treasure forever, and the rest you don't have to.
You also mentioned,
Whitney, I have something to add.
Oh, sure, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add in this vein. I turned 80 4 months ago, and Whitney is helping me really downsize. And I know exactly what you're talking about as far as sentiment. But when you get this age, it all changes because you have no future really. And so you're not thinking, oh, I should save this because it's sentimental. It's actually a lot easier to give up stuff because you're seeing the end of your life. And so all of those wonderful relationships, you just treasure for what they were, but you don't need the actual physical thing of it. So that's just my opinion about this thing. It's probably easier when you're older.
Thank you for sharing that, Mary. That was really powerful.
It's different.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned too, Pat, maybe just having some more helping hands, because now the porch is covered and you want to enjoy it for the summer. I'm wondering if maybe there could be a family and friends and neighbors work party, and maybe you feed them all a big meal and enjoy that porch when you're done clearing it off at the end of the day. So just, I don't know, just a thought to put out there.
Well, I was supposed to have a birthday party, and it was going to be at an outdoor park, and it rained. And so I asked two of the people coming if they could come help me take stuff out of the porch into our office. And but that's been over a year ago. So I was able to move it all off the porch for the day, move it all back. But I was going to say too, I started out scanning kind of a lot of stuff. And if it seemed like something my relatives, like my sisters, might be interested in, or even cousins, I've sent things to cousins. But it just becomes so time consuming. And I think, do they even care? I mean, they seem appreciative. And then the other thing is the shredding. That is just taking forever. And Oak Hills is having a free shredding event. Not this Saturday, but the next one. So I've got great big grocery bag, or what do I want to say, plastic garbage bags full of stuff that I'm planning to take there to shred. I guess those are my two things.
That's a really, that'll save you so much time.
Yeah,
That's
that's
so time
fantastic.
consuming to shred.
Yeah.
And then you have to
It
take all those
is.
little pieces and put them in something and then take them out to the garbage.
And they go
Very
everywhere.
time-consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too.
No, thanks for letting us know about the upcoming event. There are pretty regularly during the spring and summer months community shred events, and we do try to share those in our newsletter. So thanks for sharing that, Pat. That's great. You can also go to the UPS store, Office Depot, and it's about $20 for a banker's box to shred it. And we oftentimes will encourage our clients just to do that, because the cost of your time to feed that much through a shredder and probably kill your shredder and end up having to buy another one, it just doesn't end up being cost or time effective. And people get exhausted. And then when it comes to scanning documents and filing documents, unfortunately, 80% of the documents that we file or scan, we never go back and look at again. So I would check in with your relatives and see, how appreciative are they of you scanning these things, and is it really worthwhile, or could we ship them kind of slow mail to them and they can scan them in and take a look at it. Just kind of think about different options. I know, Alexis, you had a question, and then I think we have a couple in the chat as well.
Yeah, I have a question and some comments. So I helped to move my parents both from Los Angeles to Eugene. And then after my dad passed away, I helped my mom move to Willamette View here in Portland, Milwaukee area. And my mom was an interior decorator and had beautiful things. And it was very tough to let things go. But she got advice about moving, and she gave me advice. Her advice to me was, just remember, my stuff is not me. And that really, really helped me let go of things.
Yeah, that's really nice.
It was really lovely. She said, it's not me. So don't make it me. And then she had a very good friend in Eugene when she was moving to Portland, who said, and she was moving from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Eugene to a 600 square foot room at Willamette View, 1 bedroom at least. And her friend said, go through your house and pretend it's your favorite store, and then cherry pick your very favorite things. And that helped her really kind of like, if I was shopping in my house, What are the few fabulous things that I treasure that I'm going to take with me? And that was, I remember that, like, cherry pick. I love that idea.
That is so smart, so
Yeah.
smart.
It was great advice. It was great advice for her too. And then for me, I'm also over 65 and I have a garage full of things from my parents, the things she didn't cherry pick, lamps, all kinds of things. And my issue is always like, I'm happy to let go of some of this stuff, but where, how? I hate the idea of just taking things that they're probably valuable to somebody to Goodwill. What are your thoughts about, everything from tools, art, fine things? Where do we let these things go have another life?
I'm going to ask Jean to put a link to, we have a couple of blogs that we did a little while ago. One is on where to donate things, and then one is on how to turn your stuff into cash and where to sell it. And next month on June 7th, we're going to have 3 to 4 consignment and resale specialists come as guest experts. So you can ask your questions of them directly as well. But yeah, and Alexis, to our team, we have an app of hundreds of resources that we built that are local. So we're happy to help you find resources for where your items can go. Tools, the first place I think about is Habitat for Humanity Restore. And then there's also the Woodworkers Guild of Oregon. That's a nonprofit. And they will build benches like for domestic violence shelters or for children's playgrounds. So they do a lot of good things with the tools that people donate to them.
One other thing to consider, and I forgot to mention this, I had a lot of decor in my house. I'm big on decorating, and I knew I couldn't take it, so I had a party, and I invited my girlfriends over and said, everybody has to take something you love. So I knew, and I got rid of, I just filled every counter in my kitchen. I filled my dining table, my coffee table with things, and by the time they were done, they were like vultures. It was the best. They took everything, and I knew that things that I had loved are now being enjoyed by my friends. And that just really helped a lot.
That's great.
That's a great one.
We also have people
I
who
want to
have
echo what Whitney said on Habitat Restore. I downsized part of my garage to, I wasn't woodworking anymore. And there were some tools that I sold, but other tools and wood I gave away to Habitat Restore. And the stuff actually that was too big to move, well, actually, most of it, they came and picked it up because it was pretty large pieces that I was not going to use.
That's great. That is fantastic.
That is, we also have some contributions in the chat. So Deborah recommends Buy Nothing, putting items there. There's also, I think MB meant Scrap, and that's a local nonprofit where you could donate art supplies, and teachers and members of the community can come purchase art supplies at a low price to use for crafts and other projects or in their classrooms. And then there's some comments here for Pat that Juanita, she took some photos of things that she gave away, but she still wanted to remember. So she made a digital memory of them. And then another question, I need a few items picked up and taken to the dump. Would like to use a local person, not a big company, to pick up items. Any names to recommend? Thanks. Yes, Jean, I'm going to ask you to put our recommended haulers handout in the chat. But our top 2 haulers that we work with all the time are Harley Olson. He's a local young man, really nice. We work with him several days a week with our clients and on our projects. Just really lovely and responsive and a great human being. And we also highly recommend the Junk Luggers. And they are an eco-friendly junk removal company. So they'll come and take everything in their truck. They'll take it back to their warehouse and they'll sort it, and they'll donate whatever can be donated to different local nonprofits and charities. They will fix and repair items. Like, let's say your toaster is not working or your dresser is scratched up and it needs to be sanded down and refinished and then can be donated. they will do that and then donate those items and send you the donation receipts. So the junk luggers are also really fabulous as well, and locally owned.
Great service.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what other questions or insights people have.
I'd like to know what kind of luck people have with garage/estate sales.
Yeah, so this, from my understanding, is that in order to have an estate sale, you want to have about a minimum of $8,000 of value of items to sell. You also need to have ample parking, so maybe to accommodate up to 70 cars in your neighborhood. So for some of us, it might not be feasible depending on where we live. Some communities also don't allow them, especially some 55 and over senior living communities. So just something to be aware of. For garage sales, I generally, and this is my personal opinion, don't recommend them. I don't feel that they're worth the time and energy for what you get back financially. I think people have better luck selling specific items online on OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace or other similar platforms. And we also have different consignment vendors that we work with, who they each have their own specialty, but they can come take those items that they believe they can sell. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, but that has been my experience.
Completely agree. We had a yard sale and, spent weeks getting ready for it. And it made about $4. And it got rid of maybe 1/30 of what we put out in the yard, and I will never do it again.
And did they argue the price to say,
Of
try to
course.
get you down?
Of course.
Yeah.
There are a few great estate sailors in town, and yes, you do have to have estate worthy stuff, but some of them will actually bring things to your estate sale, where they will collect things from other houses or things that haven't sold and bring them. And so I agree with that. I don't agree that you have to have room for 70 cars. That I've seen estate sales and had clients do them or been a part of them, and they're fine in regular neighborhoods as long as they're not trying to do it over a 2-hour period of time. But if they do an all-day estate sale, there's always a bunch of people who come really early in the morning quick, and then it dribbles through the day. I don't think I've seen more than 10 or 15 cars at a time, but for what it's worth, you don't need to have parking for 70. Yeah.
Did the people feel it was worth the trouble and whatever they did to make it happen?
For an estate sale, if you have antiques, the house that the most recent one that I was involved in was a house that had an old, what are the horses that go up and down, like a merry-go-round horse. It had, carousel horse. It had a motorcycle in the house, all kinds of antiques, glassware, things that are really collectible for people. And yes, it was definitely worth it. But there's a big difference between an estate sale and a garage sale. Yeah.
Right.
I think something to consider too is how comfortable do you feel having people come into your home?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the timing too. For example, the estate sale partner that we work with, they usually schedule about 60 days out for estate sales. And there's different times of year that are better. So they don't do them during the winter time because they don't get a turnout that's worthwhile. So there's definitely timing, I feel, is important as well. We've got some hands up. We've got Laura and then MB.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My sister and I moved from New Jersey about 5 years ago. And unfortunately, we didn't do enough right sizing before we left New Jersey. And the moving truck had not so much furniture, but a gazillion boxes of stuff. We got to the apartment in Oregon, and the boxes of stuff were put in our storage closet and some in the garage, and they sat there for 5 years.
Yeah.
We seem to not be able to get ourselves the energy to go through those boxes and see what's in them. I couldn't even tell you what's in those boxes. I know that there are several boxes of of papers that should have been shredded in New Jersey, but we paid to move them 3,000 miles. You know, I'm not sure where to go at this point, you know, how to start tackling those things. Also, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm 69, over 69, and we don't have kids, my sister or I, or nieces and nephews. And I'm thinking about the so-called collectibles, or the things that were important to me at some time that nobody's going to appreciate. You know, when we die, somebody will just come into this apartment, take this stuff and just dump it. And I don't necessarily want to see that happen. And it's an issue of trying to gather that stuff and do something with it. You know, so here we sit. We wasted all of our COVID time when we could have been doing some of this stuff. And we need to somehow get started, but we're having trouble. And I'm looking for suggestions.
Maybe that just means that it wasn't that important to you in the first place, even though you thought at one time in your life these things were important. If you have gone 5 years without digging into those boxes, maybe this stuff is not that important, and maybe you could just more easily let it go if you think that way.
True, you're right. It probably isn't. And anything that was important probably was repurchased in the 5 years we've lived here.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know,
my
but
piece of advice, sorry, go ahead.
but I hesitate to just throw the boxes away without knowing what's in them.
Yeah, you have to look. My advice is take it one box at a time. Just don't look at the whole garage. Just, here's a box. I'm going to take the box into the living room and see what's in it. And I'm going to throw out what I don't need and put the rest back in that box, or put it somewhere in the house. Just baby steps, just baby steps.
Okay, that's good suggestions. And just, I guess, take the stuff to Goodwill or the Vietnam vets or something, just start donating stuff.
Yeah. And you can also give away, you know, things that mean something to you. You can give them to friends. It doesn't, you know, you don't have, it doesn't have to be family.
Mhm.
It's friends or
Okay.
family too.
Okay.
Something that one of our former team members did, Laura, was she would schedule a pickup with Vietnam Veterans of America twice a month. And so she knew she had that deadline. She had to have stuff out on the curb for them every couple of weeks. So having that deadline really motivated her to go through her stuff. So sometimes having that external motivator can be a big help.
That's a great idea.
They are a good service, yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Welcome. MB, I'm curious what your question is for the group.
So I'm glad, thank you so much for doing this. I think it's really beneficial to a lot of us for sure. But I'm wondering if you can address the issues of the psychological attachments that we have to things. Now, I disagree with some people here. I am my things. Now, well, it wasn't that recent. About 3 years ago, I had to leave a duplex that I loved for 24 years because it was getting too high in price. And so I moved into a senior building, and it's much smaller. And I got rid of a lot of things, but I have sort of depart with remorse, because some of the papers I let go of, some of the information I let go of, some of the clothing I let go of, because I felt, well, they're too small right now, but I'm a costumer and I alter and I change. Okay, I guess I'm trying to narrow this down, sorry, about being really attached to something. And, you know, I know that you guys can do your job and you can help people move and rearrange. But, you know, do you have a psychologist on board? Because it's really hard to let things go for some people, I think.
It definitely can be really hard. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us, MB, and sharing what your challenges are, because they're different for each of us, you know, depending on our life experience and our background. Like as a costumer, I'm sure that those items that you let go of, the clothing items, were harder than maybe for somebody who wasn't a costumer. As far as the psychological piece, I think there's a great book called Buried in Treasures, and it talks about what they call the bad guys. You know, what are the 6 main psychological roadblocks that get us? And sometimes it's kind of our limited belief system, or things that we believe to be true, but may or may not be true. So for example, I paid a lot of money for this item, therefore I'm not going to let it go unless I get a lot of money for it in return. And so that's the reason we hold on to things. Or maybe we're really concerned about the environment and we don't feel comfortable putting this item into the landfill. If it can't be recycled, I'm just going to hold on to it. But maybe I'm going to end up with, you know, not being able to use my space because I've got all of these things I'm holding on to and collecting and hoping that I can recycle it one day in time in the future. Other things are, oh, I could use this for something someday. And sometimes for those of us who are really creative, it can almost get us in trouble because, like, for example, we had a client who collected toilet paper rolls, you know, when they're empty, those little cardboard rolls, and he could think of 30 different projects he could make with those things. Wildly creative gentleman. But he had bags and bags and bags of these rolls. And so realistically, are we going to have enough time to do all of those 30 projects with those things and stay focused to do them? So those are just like 3 of the bad guys that they talk about in the book. It's called Buried in Treasures, and I'll ask Jean to put a link in the chat. So that's one resource for you. I also have a handout called 10 Tips for Letting Go of Sentimental Items. And we're actually going to be talking about this July. We're going to devote a whole workshop just to this topic because I think it's such an important one for when we're right sizing. And the sentimental items are definitely the hardest for sure.
Yeah, can I just respond real quick?
Mhm.
That's exactly, I mean, hitting the nail on the head. I mean, it's the emotional content or connection, I'm sorry. And if there was a fire, God, you know, forbid that, I would grab my photo albums because those are the most important things in my living space. And so can I really let go of these other things? Well, yeah. But I think it's just, yeah, it's extremely difficult because, and I also have a lot of fabric because I'm, you know, I did a lot of costuming for film and I know probably I won't use it all. So it's tricky. It is tricky.
It is tricky. Sometimes if we know who it's going to and that it's going to benefit someone, it makes it easier to let it go. So for example, with your bolts of fabric, maybe consider donating them to scrap, and that you
Right.
know that school children and other creative people in Portland are going to turn those bolts of fabric into some fabulous projects. So that helped me let go of my books. For me, the books were the hardest thing, and donating them to the library and realizing that somebody else is going to be able to read them instead of them sitting on my shelf and they're not benefiting anybody on my shelf. That helped me to right size my books. One other thing I wanted to comment on was you talked about the connection between our stuff and our identity. And our team, we have a book club. And we recently just read a book called Clutter and Untidy History. I'll ask Jean to put a link to that in the chat as well. But she talked about the connection between our stuff and our identity and how it is very common in our culture in the United States that we do identify with our stuff. We are our stuff. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just,
Sorry, I didn't mean to dominate the conversation here. Mary, what are your thoughts?
well, it's all based on the human condition. We are rich people. I mean, we're rich in our hearts, in our heads. We accomplish things. We love people. People love us. And we're all going to die. And we don't think about that until we're much closer to it. In fact, I mean, that's where I am now. And I've never felt this way before. There's always a future. There's always a future. Well, guess what? It's not really going to be there. And so all this stuff that I've got doesn't mean as much to me, but it's hard to think about not having a future. Like someday I'll give this to somebody, or somebody, maybe someday, it's always someday. Well, some days it's not going to be there anymore. And it's amazing when you get so much closer to that day where you have to give up your beautiful human condition. I mean, we're kind of used to ourselves, aren't we? I don't want to be, just not exist, but that's going to happen to everybody. So I think that's our curse in a way, because we are such rich creatures. So
Can I
It's
just
complicated.
respond really quick? Um, thank you for that, Mary, but I think I am going to be an artist up until the point when I die. I mean, if I get Alzheimer's or something and I can't, function, that's another thing.
Right.
But I'm an artist. And so when I have my fabric, or if I have my paints, or I have my whatever,
Yeah.
I feel like I do that all as long as I can. And so
Yeah.
to let go of any of that is just so incredible. Well, anyway, I guess I need your help, you guys, because
No,
it's hard. It's so
But I
hard.
think that's the stuff you should hang on to, because you're still
Yes.
enjoying, you're still using, you're still creating. So you shouldn't get rid of it.
Agree.
Yeah.
For a person who's dialed in on the phone, did you want to share your thoughts?
Yes, actually, I had a question. We're actually thinking of doing a reverse move. We've been in Portland 30 years, thinking of going back to New Jersey. And my thing is, I like information. So I have all these magazines with little tags for recipes or decorating. And I would like to get a system set up, like to scan it. So I still have the information, but not all the paperwork. I think that's one of my biggest challenges is paperwork, whether it's magazines or we have a lot of paperwork. We just kind of file it away, and it's we just have a lot of paperwork. So I'm just curious if there are systems out there that I'm just throwing out scanning, but I don't know if that's the way people sort of organize information.
We each organize information differently because each of us our brains are wired differently. We might be kinesthetic, we might be visual, we might be an audio learner, we might be an emotional learner. So it really depends on you and what's best for you. One program that might work for being able to scan and then find what you're looking for is Evernote, because you can tag things.
Okay.
So that might be something to check
Okay.
out. We also, I'm going to ask Jean to put in, we did a blog on right-sizing the paper in your life. And we have a lot of tips and
Okay.
ideas in that blog. One thing with magazines and information that, because I'm an information junkie myself. So one thing we recommend is,
Okay.
let's say your magazines come monthly, you can make
Yes.
some guardrails, some guidelines for yourself. So for me, if I haven't read a magazine in 2 months, I'll keep the 2 most recent issues and I recycle anything older than that. So if the next month
Okay.
one comes and I haven't read the 2 months ago, I let that one go. Or if it's, weekly newsletter or something. So you can come up with rules for yourself. You will have to hold yourself accountable or have somebody in your life assist you with that in a loving way.
Okay.
But too, if you think about like, okay, how long would it take me to go back and read all these materials that I've piled up, all this information that I want to know? Is it really realistic? Could you do that in your lifetime? For me, I could not. And I end up just having to let those
No, I
things.
probably couldn't either. You're right. Yeah. Okay. That's a good way to maybe look at it. Yeah, it's very daunting because I feel like, I can't recycle this until I've gone through it and marked what I want to keep. There's things way past 2 months in my pile. So, yeah.
Well, you can make your own rule. Maybe it's 6 months or it could even be 2 years. But too, a lot of the information can be found online somewhere else. So do we need to keep this tangible piece of paper if we could look it up if we needed it later somewhere else?
Right. Okay. Well, I guess that's a system I'll have to figure out one way or the other. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll put a link to the blog in the chat, and we'll send out all of these resources with a copy of the recording in an email afterwards. So if you're not able to copy the chat or you miss a resource here or there, don't worry about it. We're going to send you a recap.
Okay, great. Because I had trouble with the Zoom thing today on my computer. So, okay.
Georgia has a question. You're muted.
Great to see you again, Georgia.
You can't hear you.
Oops,
Georgia,
sorry.
you're muted.
Yeah.
You're still, yeah, you're muted.
Okay, while you're working on your.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, Whitney came before COVID and helped me to sort so much stuff in 3 rooms, my basement, my attic, and my side room, which I'm in right now, a little sunroom. And it began a whole transition for me to get rid of things. And it really, holding my hand, Whitney, helping me. I need to have you come again. And that's why I'm on here, because, you know, you become stagnant about getting rid of things. And it really helps to have somebody with you saying, do you need 4 of these vases? They all, you know, could you take 1? Yes. And then you took the other 3 away and they went somewhere. And, you know, and you took, and you took carloads of things from my home. And I don't even know what they were now. Can I say I have no idea what they were? You took carloads of things. And I'm thrilled that you did, because I can walk around now and I can get to what I need to do. But I still have so much more to go. That's why I tuned in today. It's the sentimental things. It's really hard to get rid of the sentimental things. And I've been looking for places to send my my things other than to Goodwill. And the community warehouse has been a great resource to take things to. I feel really good about that. William Temple House has a thrift store that's really fun to give to. And Goodwill, and, you know, anywhere where there's a thrift store. But I will be calling you to come back and help me again. And I just want to say, anybody who's out there who needs a little helping hand, it's just great to have somebody with you. It really helps. That's all. So, hi, Whitney. I have to go to some place if anybody has a question, but about anything she did. I have like a minute or 2, but I have to go. It was great.
Oh, it's so good to see you again. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you too. I'm happy that you made it through, you know, COVID and everything else. And looking forward to having you come back over here.
Thank you. It would be an honor. Just reach out when you're ready.
I will. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
And
Join
good
you.
luck to everyone. Good luck.
Thank you. So we had a question in the chat, and then I see some hands up. One was about where to donate Hummel figurines. So I would recommend for those, the Assistance League of Greater Portland. It's in Beaverton on 117th, just off of Canyon. And it's a local nonprofit, and they have a consignment side of their store. And then they also have the thrift store. And then they have kind of a bargain room too. So it's kind of like everything from garage sale worthy to consignment worthy. And so I think they might be a good fit there. I would reach out to them. They do a lot of good work in the community. They have Operation School Bell, where they provide 2 outfits, brand new outfits to kids who are in foster care every school year. They also provide clothing to sexual assault victims when they're leaving the hospital, because they have to give their clothing over as evidence. And so they don't have anything to wear home to the hospital. So they donate clothes to them, and they have about 7 different programs, and they do a lot of good in our community. So if you want to shop there, if you want to donate there, I highly recommend that. It's the Assistance League of Greater Portland.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. And then too, if you wanted to try to sell your figurines, I would have you reach out to Larry Berman of 6040, and he's going to be one of our special guests next month on June 7th. Yeah. I see Deborah's hand, and then Pat.
Thank you. I have a question. All right, here's the deal. I have one son. He's 40. He lives part-time in Japan, part-time in Portland. And then he's a minimalist to the nth degree. He's telling me, I'm gonna take all your stuff and shovel it and put it in the dumpster when you guys die. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so he's trying to help us. And I don't even think I'm that much of a hoarder. It's just that we have two issues. One, my husband was raised extremely poor. And so he has a really hard time giving up anything. Like when I first met him, he engraved his name on everything he owned and on his clothes because he had 20 brothers and sisters. So it was like, this is mine. And so we've gotten past that part, being married 42 years, but every time I give something away, it's like, oh, you're giving all our stuff away. And I'm just thinking, we don't even need it. We don't use it. So I don't want to do stuff behind his back, but at the same time, I don't think he'd miss half the stuff if I got rid of it. So between my own emotional attachment to things, I know in my head, logically, when my mom passed away, I was in charge of all her stuff and I tried to scatter it amongst the rest of the siblings, but I still have some things of hers. And I know in my head, she would not want me to hold on to stuff just to hold on to it. And if I really treasured it, it wouldn't be in a box in the garage where I don't even see it. So I know logically that, but now it's like how to let go. So I guess that was a lot of questions in one.
For your
So you
husband,
need the
would it help him
psychology department of Whitney's Talks. You need family counseling from Big Rock's psychology department.
I
That's
agree,
tough.
Mary.
That is
A lot
tough.
of our team members do have kind of a social work type background. None of us are licensed psychologists, but we do go on this emotional journey with our clients and walk through it with you. And from a perspective of respect, we're not going to come in and throw your things in a dumpster like your son wants to do. It is
tough.
hard. And it is nice to have a neutral person with you who can help coach you through the process and give you options so that you can make decisions that feel good for you. And it's also like building a muscle. So the more that you practice and the more that you right size, that muscle gets stronger and you get better and faster at making those decisions as you go. I also just want to share with you that one of our big rules at Big Rocks is we don't make decisions about other people's stuff. We want to be really respectful. So I know that your husband might not miss 50% of it, but if the items specifically belong to him, I would highly encourage you not to let go of them without his permission and without his engagement in the process, because it can just so undermine the trust in relationships if we come in and make those decisions for other people. Like, think about your son coming in. If, like, let's say you go on vacation and you come back and your son has thrown all your things in the dumpster. And then if we identify with those things as being our identities, it's like throwing us in the trash.
Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
for your husband, would it help him to think of helping other people who are in a similar situation to what he was, who don't have things and could really use those things?
I think so. I think so. I'll take that approach.
I think your son is like this generation. Our kids range from 25 to 35, and they don't want their yearbooks, let alone my china. Like, they just don't want stuff. We could all take a lesson from them. So
Yes.
I don't think it's that unusual that he just doesn't really have a lot of interest. Like, they just aren't attached to things.
No,
Like
it's
we were.
Yeah, I think they're, and I've learned from him, it should be about the experiences and not the things. And, we're on a minimalist journey, but we're older, we got a lot more stuff, and there's stuff to get rid of, and it's a process too, like Whitney said, so it doesn't just happen overnight. Plus, he doesn't have any kids. He's got no toys or Legos to pick up. I mean, he's like, oh, I can do whatever. I can fly here and fly. I'm like, yeah, it must be nice. But it's, he's got a different lifestyle. I'll just say that than us.
Maybe Whitney could come in with you, your son, and your husband, because her approach is so magical. It is so calm and sensible. And you might be surprised how they would react to just her presentation of how she does things. It might be just something that you can't convince them of, but she could.
Right. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for the endorsement, Mary. I know Pat had a question, and then Laura.
Oh, I took my hand down because I figured it wasn't that important. I'll just be real quick. On those magazine, thank you to the person on the phone, because I have a lot of magazines with little stickers. And so I'm thinking I could just pull out the articles and throw the magazine away and at least see how big a stack that makes. So that would be helpful. And I really appreciated what Deborah said. I have very similar situations. And then as far as yearbooks or wedding albums, I've been looking for my wedding album forever and finally found it. But I've been on a phone call last weekend with grade school friends, and ones went and got their yearbook, and everybody wanted their yearbook. And do I still have my yearbook? And my husband, a friend of his, didn't have his high school yearbook, and my husband scanned the whole thing and sent it to him within the last year. So maybe when you're 30, you don't care, but when you're 75, then you do. That's all. Sorry, I know it's getting late. Thanks.
We'll take one more question from Laura, and then I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up.
Okay, does anybody have any suggestions for selling or donating or somehow getting rid of baseball cards, signed baseballs, and coins?
That is a good question.
Yeah,
There's a really good coin shop in Lake Oswego where you can sell your coins.
Are they
there's
honest?
Liberty
Yes.
Coin, and then there's one in downtown Tigard as well.
I think
Okay.
there's one in Southeast Hawthorne as well, a coin shop, I think somewhere around 30, no, it's more like 50th, somewhere around 50th and Hawthorne, or lower down.
Okay,
There's also a free app where you can scan your baseball cards and it'll tell you what they're currently worth. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but if you just Google free baseball card app, scan value or something like that, it'll come up.
well, knowing the value and doing something about it are totally different things.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
I put the name of the coin shop in Lake Oswego in. It's my friend's brother that owns it. And we took all my father-in-law's silver dollars in there. They were super honest, told us what was some things. They said, hey, this is worth a lot. You should, here are other options to do with it. So I highly recommend them. They're great to deal with, and their information is in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Alexis, we'll add that to our resources. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and for engaging in this conversation and bringing your questions. I hope that you got something out of this and that it gave you value. We will be back next month. It's the first Wednesday of each month from 4 to 5 p.m. on Zoom. So next month, we're talking about how to sell your stuff and where. And we're going to have 3 or 4 different consignment and resale experts join us as our special guests. I also want to thank Andrea for being our special guest today. Thank you so much for sharing your story about right-sizing and moving across Oregon. Yeah. And Andrea also wrote this wonderful blog that's going to be published the second Saturday in May with some additional tips that she learned from her process. So stay tuned for that as well. I hope you all have a great evening, and thank you again for being here.